Hello, good evening everyone, welcome back to Role-Playing Unlimited Out of Character Thursday night. We have with us a new co-host there on the bottom frame. Say hello, Jason.
Hey everyone.
And as always, joining me as co-host of Role-Playing Unlimited here, we have Evil Dawn.
Hey, how's it going? I'm glad to be here again.
Yes, indeed. We took last week off, so we're going to give you a double episode tonight, recapping the events of the last two Baldur's Gate sessions. After the break, we will continue with our Enemir Historia. I believe we still have 2 more of those to do, but we are rapidly getting closer. And to pick it up right where we left off in the last session, we see here on the map...
And somehow Dan's audio cut out.
Uh-oh. What's the last bit you got from me?
When you said "and."
Well, alright. Sounds like we missed maybe just a couple of words there. But here on this screen we see the results of the first combat that your characters had here in El Terrell, where you rescued Harkina Hunt and her toddlers from certain death at the hands of 3 bearded devils. And that combat was already resolved when we started this session. So a lot of this was just kind of establishing the mood of El Terrell, the fact that there's a constant earthquake going on, that the city is being rocked and shaken down into the river Styx. There's this glowing blue orb in the sky that is shooting crackling lightning down upon the buildings and destroying them in single blasts.
And our DM typing them up as breaded devils instead of bearded.
Yes, that was a very narrow escape there. You guys almost had a much easier encounter.
You know, breaded devils would have probably been a lot cooler, especially if we threw a couple fireballs or, you know, some flaming oil on them.
Yeah, I think Jason had the recipe, actually. I think Basil has the full recipe for how to saute the breaded devil.
Oh, now we're bringing up some really old school NPCs and stuff like that. Yeah, Basil probably would have had that recipe.
And Anvil, the perfect accompanying beverage.
Absolutely.
Now, seeing as that's where we just started off, establishing the mood of El Terrell and proceeding on to the next neighborhood, considering that we had 2 toddlers in our group, Dawn, of course, being the protective paladin character that he is, I believe his intent was to use his Find Steed spell as a kind of guardian for these toddlers, if I understood correctly.
Right, and I was going to have the toddlers riding the horse, and the horse being intelligent and telepathic communication with me. The horse would have kept them out of combat the entire time, and if anything came close to them, it would have lashed out and attacked anything, but it wouldn't rush into combat like we tend to do.
Gotcha. And then, of course, we had a bit of a rules arbitration pause there at that moment, as we had to contest the 10-minute casting time of the spell with the fact that the city is being shaken at a pretty regular...
Oh, we lost your audio again.
Well, that's no good. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Just 1 second pause. I'm going to turn back on my keyboard. Maybe that's the issue. Alright, how's that coming through?
It's coming through good.
I hear you good.
Very good. Yeah, I wonder if this thing's got a low charge or something. Seems to be at full charge. I don't know. So we had a rules arbitration at this moment when your character attempted to cast a 10-minute spell within an earthquake type environment.
I don't know what happened, but we lost it again.
It's these techno gremlins that keep coming up.
Alright, I'm going to mute this thing entirely and plug it in. I'm actually going to send us to a quick BRB while I get this fixed up. Maybe just plugging it in will take care of it.
It's like as soon as it keys up and then he loses the key.
Alright, take 2. How's that coming through?
Yep, that's coming through pretty good.
Alright.
Read Jalima Charlie.
Alright, hopefully it does not cut out like it's been doing, but if so, then I don't know. I guess we'll take that as it comes. I'm assuming that my random inane chatter at this point is being picked up by you guys?
Yes, it is. And also, just to remind everyone where we left off, we were the intent for the horse. However, because of earthquakes and violent land rumblings, what, you can't hear me either?
No, you're good. I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. That I couldn't take the 10 minutes to cast a spell without it being possibly ruined by shifting platelets.
Correct. And we had a bit of a rules arbitration pause there, and there was a bit of a difference of either perspective or opinion that I just wanted to touch upon for a second. Just in that you as the player said, I'm casting this spell, which then prompted me to consider, is this possible? Does the spell go off? Should I check the book? Of course, if I know the rule offhand, then I'm going to just respond with the mechanics as I know them. As I did not specifically know this one, this was definitely cause for pause to crack open the PHB, look through the spell mechanics, and see how this would work. After which point, you retracted the casting of the spell because it was not going to be possible, and you didn't want to burn the second level spell slot. Now, differences of perspective and opinion aside, just as players who've GM'd campaigns in your own right, but also as from the player's perspective, because you are players in this campaign, how do you prefer to see situations like that handled in both respects? If you're the GM, how would you handle that? If you're the player, how do you want your GM to handle that for you?
Well, and I think the key point on my part of the debate is the fact that we don't play out every second of the travel. So therefore, when we never got like every 5 minutes of here's an earthquake, because it really didn't affect any play. If the earth did shift and it didn't cause any damage, it's not like you were going to stop the entire game to say, oh, 5 minutes in the earth shifts or 3 minutes in the earth shifts. So I didn't realize the frequency of these earthquakes. And because of the fact that it didn't get brought up because of that, I didn't think that the earthquakes would have been violent enough to cancel that spell out. But as you said, these are the earthquakes that are happening, and these would cancel out the spell. So that's why I would retract it, because my character, knowing his magic, would know it enough to say, oh, if I don't have 10 minutes uninterrupted, I can't get this to work.
Right. And just to interject there slightly, as I was kind of covering it at the time, because we took this casting of the Fine Steed spell and the ensuing earthquake thereafter, we took it on both sides of a break. And even before that, the first earthquake your characters experienced was the session before, at the very end of the session. So I kind of touched upon that when it was Justin and James and myself coming back from the break, and I said, some of that's on me, because as GM, that's my job to be descriptive and make sure to set the scene for you guys and make sure that you have a thorough understanding of what's going on around you. At the same time, there's only so much you can do with the remote style of play, in addition to the fact that we're talking about 5 minutes of in-game time that took place over 8 days of out-of-game time, because we experience it at the end of one session, start off again at the beginning of another session, and then we take a break and then come back and resolve it after that.
So, Jason, you weren't there for any of that. So what are your opinions on that scenario?
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is there is no perfect system. And whether you're playing or GMing, we all have our perspective on the rules, especially from our point of view, either as the player or the DM. Now, one of the best things you can do, we tend to become rules lawyers because of this. We know the rules as players, and we try to help the DM as we go, and sometimes it gets out of hand. But on the other side of that coin, when we do know these rules, it helps the GM because we understand them. It's like the game that I jumped in the other night. I'm still not familiar with 5e. I'm still stuck in my brain on Pathfinder 1e. So certain spells work a certain way in my brain. and I have to relearn how some things have changed. And it's okay. It's gonna when you come up. I've been playing since 1E in the early 80s. So a lot of things have changed. You know, we don't have Thaco anymore. All pluses are good, all minuses are bad. That wasn't always the case. So when you come into these imperfect situations, especially when the timing just doesn't line up, both in game and out of game, those are the things that slow us down, and we really try as a matured gamer, we try to avoid those as often as possible. When we're younger, we love to argue about stuff like that. That's half the fun of the game. But as we grow and learn new rules and keep going, the story is what keeps us interested. And to keep that story going, we have to help each other, and sometimes we trip on our own 2 feet. Too many cooks spoil the broth, and then it can go the other way, where nobody knows the rule, and we have to stop or can't remember the rule, especially in my case. I'm getting old, can't remember things. You know, we all have to go back and look. And then some rules are written in a certain way where it could be either way. So in the end, it all comes down to the DM.
That's part of the beauty of role-playing games, too, is they give you enough of a framework that you can understand how the world, the universe, whatever the setting is, how it works. But they leave enough ambiguities for you to be able to have some creativity in flavoring the mechanics, adding to the mechanics, house rules, and whatnot.
So, out of curiosity, were those earthquakes and the timing of the earthquakes denoted by the module, or was it something that you added in as a GM to enhance the flavor of the game?
That is one of the specific features of the module at this stage, because you're on this rock that is Elturel as it's being continually shifted, and the state of destruction of the city around you is evidence of just how perpetual this process has been, whether it's the literal ground being shaken apart beneath you, whether it's these lightning bolts from above just striking down and shattering the roof above your head. It's literally been hell for the people of Elturel until your characters got here and they finally have some kind of shining beacon to hold on to.
Or shining from getting hit in play mail by lightning and that glowing for a little while.
Yeah, that was a fun roll right there. That was one of those where I was kind of talking to the streaming audience, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but that's something I do sometimes, and I notice the players catch me doing it. They're like, if you're talking to us, we can't hear you. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I'm just talking to the streaming viewers on the side while you guys are making up your minds. But the percentile system, that's always been one of my favorite mechanics and my favorite house rules that I like to do is I roll a percentile, which sets the number, and then everybody else rolls a percentile, and whoever comes closest to it, high or low, regardless, they're the one that's having the effect placed on them, for good or for bad. And in this case, of course, it's Dawn that has it on him, and I'm just like, man, I rolled a 33 and Dawn rolled a 32. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to get any closer than that.
Yep. But as you said, we are getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, yeah, so one of the other points that came up during the game is everyone thinking that Celestial was so mean because I wanted to send the woman and the children away because I knew we were attractors to all these devils and demons and bad stuff that was happening. And it's like, do you really want to drag along a woman and children through this hell? And people are pointing out, well, no, we'd probably want to take them with us so that we could protect them better. And that's also a double-edged sword right there. I mean, you know, if there's a burning building, do you want to take people with you through the burning building, knowing that outside, you know, there might be a hailstorm about to hit? I mean, what is your, you know, six of one, half dozen of another, but everyone was thinking Celestial was being, really mean by sending them away. And it's like, dude, we're collecting this stuff. This stuff is out there specifically to attack us. Why put them in harm's way?
Yeah, and of course, for my part, I was speaking entirely out of game anytime I poked fun at that. Whereas in game, of course, and I genuinely didn't put enough emphasis on this, but I thought it was a cool back and forth just between you and Justin in that respect to show the different sides of intelligence versus wisdom. Because even though we went with Justin's character's suggestions, that doesn't necessarily mean that your character had no points to make. Your character had some valid points. I mean, the more people we have with us, the bigger a target is on our back. The module brings that up in certain respects. If you're bringing along too many people with you, X, Y, and Z might happen. So, even though we did go with Justin's suggestion, it was fun to see, okay, here's the high intelligence character versus the high wisdom character, and who's going to win out the opinions of the rest of the group.
Right, and my wisdom was the wisdom of protection and what can happen, within our group, because I've seen our group fall, and it's like, if our main fighters fall, that's going to leave our defenseless people completely defenseless, and Justin bringing up intelligently, but if they were with us, we could protect them.
This comes down to one of those things where, it's perspective, but this is one of those opportunities where it gives us the ability to take the role of the character rather than just rolling the dice for role play, to kind of become that character and look at the situation through that character's eyes. And I think that's one of the things over the last decade or so that's really gone through the wayside with some of the streamlined rules and the video game style rules with addition fatigue. And we've forgotten that we're playing a role here. We are actually, it's like an actor. And I think I learned this lesson firsthand when I first started to do LARPing.
I think Jason's getting hit with the gremlins
at
now
the table.
I'm sorry for talking over you, Jason, but you were cutting in and out pretty badly in there too.
Yeah, you were saying that it was something you learned from LARPing, and then I think everything after that got lost.
Yeah, we have a storm rolling in. So, what I was meaning is, I learned that lesson LARPing, to play the role at the table.
I dig that for sure. I mean, especially as we play more and more different systems and different campaigns, our group has definitely become more role, R-O-L-E focused rather than R-O-L-L focused. Although we do have a few in the group, and there's nothing wrong with either style of play. I mean, if you're looking at playing the game as a mechanical system and there's a problem that you're trying to find the solution to, there's nothing wrong with that style of play. The opening pages of the DMG 5e detail the different styles of players, and that's by no means an exhaustive list. But as I'm reading through the different descriptions of, you've got the tactician type player, you've got the role player, you've got this type of player, and it's, as I'm reading through, I'm like, I can identify certain aspects of these traits in the players that are sitting at my table, and just knowing that gives you fuel to work with and help you build the campaigns for stuff that they're looking for.
And the other thing with the role ROLE players is the fact that, yes, our attribute numbers say one thing, but we tend to play our characters a little differently than what the numbers specify. So it's like, and again, we've had this conversation before with, three of us having 8 intelligence, but each one of us plays that intelligence to a different level. and adding certain aspects to it. Like I'm adding a lot of wisdom because I have a pretty decent wisdom to my intelligence versus our monk who has good wisdom and low intelligence, but put as a trait on his dumb in big bold letters. His character, even though it's an 8, he's dumb.
That reminds me of the Dead Bob show at all the Ren fairs.
Yeah,
DEDBOBSHO.
That's funny. I was going to say, I was literally just thinking of that earlier today as I'm reading through Marvel Secret Wars 2, and they have an issue that focuses on Mephisto corrupting the Thing to attack the Beyonder as a distraction. And I'm reading the Thing's dialogue, and I'm reading his thought bubbles, and the Thing is not that stupid. I mean, Ben Grimm was part of this team of astronauts that were going into space. He wasn't the dumbest rock on the block. He wasn't as smart as Mr. Fantastic, but I'm just looking at that as, what are his actual attributes? And the person playing Benjamin Grimm, I mean, of course, this is taking it to the levels that role players take everything to when they're watching a movie and seeing a comic. They're like, all right, what's the character sheet of this guy look like? But just the motivation behind the player. How did they decide, okay, well, I'm part of this elite NASA team that's had their budget pulled, and we're going to launch this rocket anyways into this radiation storm. And my intelligence score is actually this, but I decided that I'm going to play my guy really, really dumb.
Yeah, because Ben Grimm was the pilot of the ship. How can you be dumb and be the pilot for a spaceship? You have to have a little bit of intelligence to drive a car. You have to have more to drive a bus, but to pilot a spaceship,
you would think, yeah. And as usual, I think we've successfully accomplished an 18 to 20 minute tangent there from traveling with non-combatants to the next scene that's been sitting on our central VTT for a while. And this is the first, or one of the first peaks we're getting anyway, of these scenes in GM mode. So you as players typically do not see this warm and fuzzy aura that encompasses Lulu there in the center of the screen. But I have described it on at least one occasion where when she's nearby you just kind of feel warm and protected. And rest assured that I keep that aura up and I know exactly what it does. And I'm sorry. And it's going to definitely prove useful in future encounters. Now, this encounter specifically, moving ahead to the east here, we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit, but down in this dark area here that was meant to simulate a collapsed building, we heard some dwarves crying for help. Your characters began the first of what was called the Night of Natural 20s. I think so far I've counted 11 of them in a 30-minute span. And I'm still only just scratching the surface. There's a lot more game to watch, and I'm sure there were a lot more natural 20s rolled. But the two natural 20s combined between, I believe in this case it was Calidor and Grulok, saw the rescue of these three dwarves back here. The one in the far back is a female acolyte of Moradin, so you managed to rescue a cleric of sorts who's got some extra healing spells and boosts that she can provide to the team. And all the ruckus that you made in freeing these dwarves drew the attention of this Maragon and the three Spine Devils. And this combat was nearly a flawless victory for your characters. The Maragon got to go first after the dwarves, and the dwarves just stepped back. The Maragon went first, moved over here past these spikes, used a halberd, and stabbed out at Celephiel, and actually bypassed your armor class. I think I hit you with a natural 20 again. I think it was another natural 20. And struck off like 20 hit points from your character. After that, it was all the player characters. Everybody rushed up. The Maragon got annihilated. Justin tossed a thunderous fireball at the Spine Devils and killed one of them instantly, and then between Rhea and Grulok and Celestial and Rhea over here, your characters just completely wiped the floor with the 3 Spine Devils, or the 2 Spine Devils that were left.
You can't forget the us having Hawkeye with us in female commoner form.
Very true. Continuing with the Knight of Natural 20s, the mother of the 2 toddlers, who's standing right here, her first 2 attacks were natural 20s, and she's only got a +2 bonus to attack. So the fact that she starts off with 2 natural 20s, we started some friendly competition where it was, okay, well, because Dawn tried to kick you out of the group and didn't want you along, she's going to make sure she proves her worth. And then Dawn is all of a sudden, well, how is this CR half character showing me up? So he walks up and rolls himself a pair of natural 20s. And then Rhea, the NPC who's been with the group for 6 weeks at this point, is like, well, I haven't rolled this many natural 20s in 6 weeks. And then she walks up and rolls herself a pair of natural 20s.
Yeah, it was like, what went wrong with the random number system? Or did the random number system say, you know what? I have a whole lot of these natural 20s I haven't used in a long time. Here, have them all.
Right. And I figure part of that, we're going to see an increase in natural 1s and natural 20s. Just because of the advantage toggle always being set to on the character sheets. So you're always rolling 2 dice for every check. So the chances for either number to appear are that much greater. But to see, I feel like 2 natural 1s came up in the same span that 11 natural 20s popped up.
Yeah, I think that was the case too. But a lot of times, those 1s came up in the wrong spot. They came on our side for us to miss. Versus, all right, here's the advantage roll, and let's see it hit on the other side.
For sure. Yeah, when I rolled my trifecta of natural 20s, the 3 in a row, the opposite side of one of them was a natural 1. So it could have just as easily been a nat 1 instead of a 20 on that particular roll.
Yeah, it's just weird on how, sometimes the dice are with you, sometimes they are against you. But yeah, that was a pretty decent combat, even though I took about half my hit points in damage. I max hit points I have at 49, but I haven't had full hit points since before coming into hell. So
that reminds me of what Jason used to type. I think it was Jason that anytime we were playing in the previous Star Wars or the Enemy or campaigns, no matter what you rolled, it was always praised be the dice or blessed be the dice, because you didn't want to say anything bad about them. Even when they rolled bad, you were like, praised be the dice, and then, hey, look, I got a natural 20.
Yeah, the dice giveth, the dice taketh away.
Now we see here on our tabletop map the next encounter across El Terrell. After your characters found 1 minute to take a short rest, we've since transitioned to the epic rest variant, because finding an hour to get a rest in this city is going to prove to be near impossible. So after a 1 minute short rest, your characters continued on. This was an optional encounter. Basically, the intent was all of this rubble here in the center would have been sufficient had your characters wanted to just pass this way up this dark alley and avoid the ghouls altogether. But because one of the ghouls was sporting +1 studded leather and had a pouch with some potential extra magical gear inside of it, your characters decided the risk was worth the reward. And the NPC is rocking at this point. All the NPCs are firing on all cylinders. So their confidence is as high as it can possibly be. Even the dwarves who have no class level are like, bring it on! So your characters got the jump on these ghouls, wiped the floor with them, and claimed all of the magical gear on this ghoul for yourselves.
Well, you used the term all, but it was 2 items that may be very important later. Studded leather armor, magical, and potion of invisibility.
Yeah, the potion might be the biggest benefit, just depending on what spell selections your characters get later on, what you have at your disposal. Your characters have focused pretty hard on defense in the early stages, so finding a +1 suit of studded leather isn't necessarily the greatest find in the world, but keep in mind that mundane gear, anything can happen to it at any time. So magical gear is always the preference, even if it is a lesser mechanical benefit.
Well, the other thing too is that I don't know if anybody's actually wearing that armor or not at this point, because I'm wearing plate. Ben is wearing chain. The monk can't wear any armor. Our sorcerer is not wearing any armor. We don't have the ranger with us anymore. And let's see, am I missing?
Yeah, it's sitting right here on the party treasure inventory. It's gone. I don't know who's carrying it, but nobody is wearing it at this moment.
Oh, and James, our fighter, is he wearing chain?
No, I think you guys upgraded him to plate mail as well.
Okay, yeah, we got him some better armor too. So yeah, mechanically the leather armor, and I might bring that up because carrying the leather armor around is kind of pointless on us. That we should throw it on either Reyna or throw it on to Mom with the bow.
Yeah, possibly Harkina, the mother. Rhea's pretty happy with her splint mail, plus it's also got etchings to Torm and what have you on it, even though it's non-magical. It's got a certain sentimental value to her anyway. And
so yeah, maybe we may throw that on Harkina later.
Yeah, definitely good to make use of all the gear that you have.
Oh wait, jumping ahead, Harkina is no longer with us at this point. They've hid and they're safe in a building waiting for us to come out of the cathedral, but I jumped way ahead on that one.
Yeah, that's into the midst of session 2 right there, but everything's just kind of free flow when it comes to storytelling in this design anyway. I don't think anybody ever remembers everything perfectly in a linear fashion. There's always some kind of like, oh yeah, I gotta rewind this and add this detail in that I might have forgotten. It's after the ghoul encounter that your characters come here to the dividing point of El Terrell, which we can see the river used to be here. Now with the nature of this city being pulled down into the river Styx, it's just a large chasm between both sides of the city. And Rhea has led you to this point, and upon the bridge, several of your characters spot some sigils to Torm indicating that this bridge has been consecrated in his name. And long story short, with the bridge, your characters sent Rhea up to see if she could say the proper prayers to activate the sigils on this bridge. And being that she is a follower of Torm, she had advantage on the roll. She successfully activated the bridge, which caused the entire bridge to glow with radiant energy. 5 of the devils were just disintegrated in a matter of seconds, and the 6th devil I like to have a little fun with, he just kind of jumped off the side thinking, haha, I can fly! But he realized that he'd actually been demoted a few days earlier, and this form no longer had wings, so and that was how we quickly killed 6 devils and passed over to the other side of the city.
Well, and the other thing, Calidor and Celephiel used their religion checks, and they could figure out the prayers and such, but neither one of them wanted to do it because of the fact that they have their own gods that they worship. They didn't want to have an issue with that relationship. Oh, you're going to jump to another god just because it's more convenient for you?
That's something, too, that I think unless you have an in-depth knowledge of Forgotten Realms is that a lot of people in the realms tend to worship more than one god, or they pay homage to more than one god. But that's not necessarily always the case with the extreme cases like paladins and clerics, as you're evidencing here. But somebody like Rhea, who does pay homage to Torm, she's not a chosen of him, she's not a cleric or anything, so if this had been a bridge of some other deity by chance, she might have still been willing to go up and give it a try.
Right, and again, because she has that, ability to be fluid between many different gods, because she is not a chosen of that god, like being a paladin or being a cleric for that god specifically.
For show. Alright, so our next map here. This was my favorite one here, and Celefiel's least favorite, arguably. Perhaps of the entire campaign.
We can skip this part. I mean, we've been wasting a lot of time here. We still want to get to the next adventure. I mean, we could just skip right over this.
You know,
it was a minor little encounter that was just, very bad, very painful. It's time to move on.
I specifically moved past the last two maps a little bit more expeditiously so that we could linger on this one a little bit longer. So rest assured, we got time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's bring it on.
Okay, so not my best map work here. I'm trying to basically design a fog kind of effect over a map that's already got the same darkness layers that we've seen on previous maps here with the Hateful Patrol and the Ghoul Pack and what have you. But for the zombie horde, we've got this dark map with the fog overlay, and then I've still got some infernal terrain on top of that, so it's not the prettiest map, not my best work. But here, at this spot, we hear a door being pounded upon from the inside. And Dawn's character walks over to the door and announces himself in a clear voice as a Paladin of Tyr, and "Do you need help?" And the door instantly is thrown onto his character. He falls down the stairs, is pressed up against the side of this rock, which you can only see now for the zombies not covering it up entirely. And he's kind of wedged under this door, half curled up against this rock. And there's zombies just all over him, trying to bite at him. And we just kept making analogies to he's like a can of Spam, or he's like a can of Dinty Moore beef stew or something, that these zombies are just trying to figure out how the hell do we get at this thing? Because you're talking about monsters with a +3 attack bonus against an AC of 22. And at this point, the natural 20s sadly had left my arsenal, so thankfully I think that's the only reason that Dawn's character's still alive to talk about this.
And the other thing too is that, I think, thinking back now on it, I probably should have gotten cover from the door. Just saying, it would have made things a little bit more entertaining, but I should have gotten cover from that door.
Well, in some respects you did, but in other respects, some of them had advantage against you, and they just rolled so poorly that it didn't matter. I don't think any of them actually even got through on you. But moot point now, as we've successfully killed all 12 of the zombies. Our Acolyte, I think, actually used one of her healing spells in this combat. We can see Rhea was on babysitting duty here in the back. And speaking of babies, this little girl here somehow managed to stay hidden inside of this ruined house from the 12 zombies that were inside of there. And as your characters have rescued her and brought her back to the High Hall, there will be some benefits from having done that, and will likely be seen in the next session.
Well, little spoiler here, and depending on how things happen, but Celefiel's intention is, after this is all said and done, and after they take this out and get, he's going to want to adopt her bring her to the temple and start training her into the ways of Tyr, to either become a paladin or to become an acolyte of Tyr.
Well, that's some thinking ahead right there, brother.
You know, because she's an orphan at this point. He was an orphan, and this is how he was raised and how he became what he is today. So he wants to give her that same opportunity.
That's one of those fun little tidbits that's in a module or a pre-generated game that you can take and expand upon in later games. Perhaps it could be a PC later on, provided nothing happens written in this module for that NPC to begin with. But it's one of those little things that allows you to continue in the world.
Well, and as you were saying on that too, is if another module happens like years later, you know, Celestial could have retired at that point, and then his daughter takes over his mantle and becomes the next paladin in the next campaign.
That could be fun for sure. There is definitely a connectivity between the different 5e Forgotten Realms campaigns, as we've seen just between, I want to say, the Horde of Tiamat and this campaign in particular. And the Horde of Tiamat, that seems to kind of be the central one. That one kind of ties into a lot of them. We should play that one next. But I know it also tied into Storm King's Thunder, which was the first one we played. I don't think it tied into Curse of Strahd, which, of course, we don't have to ever discuss that debacle again.
That's the thing too, is that again, you know, she doesn't have to be a paladin when she grows up. I mean, she could have tried being a paladin and fell and didn't acquire, you know, so she could have be just a fighter, or she could have been, you know, not into the whole religion thing, but she likes performing, so she could be a bard, you know, learning the knowledge from the acolytes, or she could go turning 180 degrees and go behind her dad's back and become a rogue, you know, with a paladin as a father. So there are so many branches you can go with this that we could do an entire show of what happens to this kid afterwards.
Oh yeah, I mean, I gotta imagine that's why Justin designs genealogies for all of his characters, because in his mind he gets that extra satisfaction of having that character just all that more fleshed out.
And when you first described that character, the first thing I thought of was Newt from Aliens.
Okay, yep. You know, that would be a really good, you know, comparison between the two, because she was found in a cupboard where Newt was found in a cabinet as well. Somehow survived the alien attack. She somehow survived the zombie attack. So, yeah, it is a very good comparison.
Well, that's because they mostly come out at night. Mostly. I may have seen that movie a few too many times.
I think we all have.
Oh, it's only one of the greatest ever, so why the F not? Alright, and here we have made the transition from one session to the next. So, had we done the show last week, this is where we would have called it, made the transition into the Enemir Historia. As it is, we're going to cover now the events of this Tuesday session from a couple nights ago. And the first appearance of Dag and his mechanical weasel pig Panzer. Get real close up on these guys right here. This was a combat that took place outside the front gates here of the cathedral in front of the High Hall. And we can see here some more infernal terrain, different elevation, different rubble, and Jason's character was first encountered hiding behind this rubble here as if he was trying to sneak past the Hellhounds to get to these gates. And as your characters approached from the southern end of the map here, you spotted that one of the Hellhounds had in turn spotted his character and was lunging in for an attack, and that's where the initiative began. And As I always like to say, any combat where you see green health bars and a bunch of red X's on the red health bars, that's what you want to see on either side of the table, and that's exactly what we have.
Yep, first round of combat, Sluffield charges in and plays a protector and stands in front of him, not knowing what his skills or abilities are, but it's like, hey, stay behind me, I'm here to protect you.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where both RP and the combat side, the mechanical combat side of it, coincided and worked together to make the encounter gel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to ask, what was your character's first impression of all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy just runs up in plate mail in front of you saying, hey, stay behind me, I'm going to take the attacks for you?
Well, considering the only companion he had at the time was his mechanical weasel pig, he's happy to see a live face that's not a zombie or a demon or a devil, and something that's there to protect him rather than consume him.
Also, in the kind of that point of view is, yes, the hounds were ready to attack you, but we've been fooled before. But Celestial just keeps forgetting that. And I don't know if he keeps just forgetting it or if it's just his nature that I'm going to protect everybody until you prove that you're bad. And I'm not going to hold a suspicion on anybody until they are proven unworthy.
So it's not quite naivety, but almost a blind, I don't want to say a blind trust, but the ability to give the benefit of the doubt until they prove otherwise. Because we as players are often suspicious of everything. Why is the table alive? Why is it eating stupid mimics?
Or if you know there's a player behind the face, it translates into the scene from the gamers where the mage character has just been killed and they're outside the evil ruins of their final destination, and they find another mage, and the GM encourages them. Remember, the last guys you encountered tried to kill you, so just play this appropriately. You seem trustworthy. I'd like to join your group. I notice you have no wizard. By all means.
Like
and that's one of the cheesy things of the game. It's one of the things about the game that make it fun and cheesy that works in these situations, but they don't necessarily work in a big theatrical production.
Well, also look at it this way. I would have had more suspicion over the little girl because she survived in a den of zombies versus this guy that's now about to be attacked by bad things.
I guess we can at least count our lucky stars that our characters' introductions went off better than, say, those of the Avengers.
We lost you on sound again.
How dare you? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Alright. I was just saying it's a good thing that your characters' introductions went off better than, say, the Avengers.
Or better than Matheson.
Oh, God. Oh, that poor Schmo never stood a chance. I thought he'd be the coolest little addition.
From our last adventure where Matheson was deemed unworthy and Denshar wanted to kill him like every 15 minutes for just no apparent reason.
Well, I mean, you were playing the murder hobo character, so that's to be expected in some respect.
But when the rest of the party never got behind that NPC, and it was always, hey, even the paladin is like, let's stick up for Denshar versus, Matheson because he's one of us, and it's like, I'm the murder hobo, you're a paladin, you probably shouldn't be on my side for anything.
I don't think I've ever had an NPC who put together a more cohesive argument and had a more...
we lost your sound again.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with my computer. I don't think I've ever had an NPC who put together a more cohesive argument than Matheson did. But you guys rejected him all the same.
Yep, we lost you completely there, Dan.
Mhm. Womp, 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 womp. Well, let's.
Now we can hear
Ah,
you.
we caught you monologuing.
So,
And we lost it again.
so Jason, we'll be back in just a moment.
All right, how about now?
Yep,
I
can
gotcha.
hear you.
Well, let's hope it remains the case. So at this point, this is just one instance that every group goes through at least a few times throughout the campaign, is the introduction of a new character. And in this case, the introduction was as simple as he is part of the combat that we're going to have anyway. What are, as players and GMs in your own respect, some of your trademark or favorite ways that you like to use for introducing new characters?
So something that I like to do, especially when it's a group of all new players or players that don't know each other, such as playing a pre-generated game or pre-generated characters at a convention. You usually take, for me, I like them to take a little bit more time to not only introduce themselves to each other as a PC, but it's at the same time they get to learn about themselves the same way. So giving that opportunity a little bit of role play, especially if you're in the middle of a combat like this, gives you that first dig into the character. Whether you're just digging into the mechanical rules of it, or you're digging into the personality and bringing the personality up to the top.
Part of that too, though, it depends on your character. Again, if you have a character like my previous character, Denshar, he's an assassin. He's an assassin monk who doesn't really get along with anybody, so he's not going to take the time to learn who you are or understand you from a regular perspective. But also take a look at work too. I mean, me in real life, I work in a call center where sometimes I'm working around people that I know who they are, but it's something that I just don't get in depth with. There's very few people that I'm in depthly talk to, even within my own circle of influence.
One of the things that I look at when I'm creating characters, be it a player character or an NPC, I try to take a slight psychological approach, looking at the Myers-Briggs psychology grid rather than looking at the way people look at the alignment system. It gives you a little bit better idea of what the character is rather than the alignment. The alignment it's a good system that gives you a moral base, but it doesn't give you an idea of what the person that the sheet makes.
True, because even though that previous character was chaotic evil, he had a moral code of, he wasn't going to kill his party members, he wasn't going to stab them in the back. They were tools to him that, if he betrayed them, he knows that will set off a domino effect of them betraying him, and he's more vulnerable without them than he is with them.
And that's where some of the other factors of intelligence and wisdom come in that can modify what your actions are as an alignment.
Yeah, that's always one of the trickier parts of playing any character is once you've got enough experience in the system and you know all the counters and all the moves and all the terminologies, to play a character who doesn't necessarily have all that knowledge.
Right, especially when you're dealing with the same monsters, because level 1 creatures, I mean, they all run into several different things. It's either an animal, or it's a low-level skeleton, or undead, or it's goblins. You don't have a lot of variety on there, because anything with a lot of special abilities, the beginning of this module, anything with the really weird special abilities are going to screw over your first and second level characters every single time.
That's one of the situations where you want your players to. Rule number one is have fun. So if your players aren't having fun, you've got to change something. And one of the things that I always say is, rule number one is all rules are optional except rule number one: have fun.
That's a very
so
good
if
point.
your players are having issues, the rules are literally getting in the way of having fun. You almost kind of have to. That's kind of bouncing back to what we were talking about earlier. As a GM, sometimes you have to make a ruling, even though it breaks a rule or creatively fudging. You have to keep it within the rule of cool, because nobody wants to play a game that's no fun. They won't come back. You want people to come back.
Tell me about it.
I mean, let's look. And let's look at. We're looking in the future at this point with my comments and such, but Dan and I had a lot of back and forth conversation about the next game, and it's the game that you're going to be in as well, and myself, where I wanted to come up with a story background similar to Aquaman. I mean, because Aquaman looks human, but he comes from Atlantis, where everybody's blue and has the green hair and everything else like that. Why does he look human? And my next character was going to be, is a pirate, and he's a Triton, but he's not a full-fledged Triton. He's going to be like half Triton, and it's not going to affect the ability scores or anything like that. It's just that he looks more human than a typical Triton. And we talked about this back and forth, and Dan brought up some really great points about, yeah, but if he looks perfectly human, what's to stop another player from going, hey, I'm going to make a half dragon that looks perfectly human and have all the abilities, or a drow that looks perfectly human and have all the abilities and no side effects. So we made a big compromise on, okay, he doesn't have a lot of the gills and all the stuff hanging off of him, but he is bluish and his hair is a unnatural green, and it's always been that way. And so that's what he was picked on in the orphanage for, was always looking that way.
Right, and that the background of the character, what you come up with, it ultimately helps you delve in not only to the persona that you're playing, but the game and how you interact with the rest of the players, NPCs, and monsters even.
Yeah, we had a very interesting group for the Storm King's Thunder campaign. The running joke throughout most of that campaign was that the characters basically negotiated their way through every single combat.
I had a homebrew game that I had all my players feeling sorry for a goblin, and he kind of became the party mascot for a while.
Goodness.
Well, I mean, one time, again, we're throwing out lots of different tangents, but that's the great thing about this show, is we could talk about anything and make it interesting for our viewers. But way back when, I threw in a moral dilemma where it's like, okay, you find this cave, and inside the cave are all these kobolds, and you killed all the male kobolds and all the warriors, and now you come into this one room, and now it's all just women and children. And it's like, okay, now what do you do? and the women and children are like, you've killed all of our protectors, you've killed our hunters, you've killed all of our, you know, our husbands and everything else like that, you know. And it's like, are you now going to slaughter this entire? And it's like, look, these people are now 100% defenseless. You don't have to make a single die roll. If you want to slaughter them, they're all dead. But this is a moral dilemma that you now have to face.
If your name is Anakin, you keep going.
It's very Game of Thrones as well. After you think you've won the day and heroic celebration is called for, and bring out the feast and bring out the band with the triumphant music, and oh, actually there's something bad. Oh, of course there's something bad.
You know, and that's there again, back to the story. You know, you have characters literally in hell. You know, you look all the way back to 1E, and there's that one picture. It's a little black and white drawing of a paladin fighting in hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet $1 to a dime that little black and white picture is what led to this particular module being made.
Interesting.
And so far, I'm actually, you know, even though a lot of bad stuff has happened to Celestial so far, I mean, he's been dropped, you know, more times than the mic at a comedy club. He's, you know, for the most part, the encounters have been balanced, because you wouldn't think that level 5, hopefully going to level 6 next game, hint, hint, would go into, you know, would actually balance it enough so that you're not being swarmed by these devils that have so many powers and abilities that they can squash your character in minutes.
Well, that's one of the things where I obviously didn't play the first session or the first third of the module, but looking at it from an outside perspective, you've got an entire city literally on chains. You know, maybe the vast majority of all those local inhabitants are what's pulling the city down. They're actually working the mechanism to pull the city down, so they can't leave. Otherwise, the city would float back away.
Right, but it's great that it's like all low-level devils and demons, and it's not like you turn the corner and there's a major pit fiend lord standing over, you know, a level 20 creature looking over these level 5 creatures, that it's like, oh look, fireball, fireball, fireball. Oh, and legendary action, I throw 3 more fireballs. Oh yeah, you're all dead now.
I do like the design of this module, because you've played in my Enemir games enough to know that my typical progression of monsters is they escalate along with the party. I don't typically throw a lot of here's 50 CR half characters for you to just wade through at level 10. I'll throw 1 or 2 CR9, CR11 creatures at you, both for logistical ease on my part, and also because I like to keep things challenging. But for this module in particular, I like what they've done in having you face some of these more powerful CR3, CR4 devils right in the first act of the campaign, so you can get a taste of just how deadly they can be. But now you're here at level 5, facing the same tier of devils, and you're getting that satisfaction of knowing that you've stayed the same, we're getting better, and now whereas that spine devil with its 2 ranged attacks used to be able to tool the entire party, now we can face 3 of them accompanied by another devil and still beat the shit out of it.
Right, but the one thing I also, in our very last combat of the game that we had, and we didn't go into detail on that, and I don't know if we're going to have the time or if we're going to go into full detail on that, but on that last one where you had 3 slaves to this devil and they attacked, and okay, so they get 3 attacks per round. Our best guys have 2 attacks per round, but the one thing that kind of annoyed me at the time was the fact that they were really well armed for slaves. You know, it's like they had scimitars and swords, and, you know, if they were really slaves to this devil, would they keep those weapons?
Well,
you know,
when the devil
and
owns your soul and has your literal life in its hands, absolutely. But considering the fact that they were deranged and out of their mind, they definitely weren't as deadly as they could have been.
oh, they told me real bad, I mean, I went down at that point again, and it's like that's the other thing too is that it is frustrating when you're playing a character that, yes, I have a lot of hit points, but at no point can I gain enough to actually be um, considered, I have great defense, but there's a lot of ways around that defense. And it's just, it does get frustrating when it's like, look, I have a 22 armor class, I have 49 hit points at max, I can never get back to max hit points, and we're attacked by all these things that, yes, they're getting through that 22 armor class to drop me.
Yeah, you're definitely realizing the roles that Justin and Ben were playing in the last campaign when you got to play Denshar, and he got in more than his fair share of up close encounters, more than you were comfortable with on many occasions, I know. But now you have, in and out of game, told this group, I am the front line. You guys fall in behind me, and we'll establish the front there. So just in that respect, you've always got to be prepared that you're going to have a lot of attacks coming your way, and unless you get access to the shield spell like Ben did, you're going to be getting hit a lot.
Oh yeah, but that's the other thing too is that, and I kind of hope Ben isn't watching at this point, but I'm just kind of thinking that he's fudging the amount of spells that he can cast just between us. I mean, when he's casting third level spells and all of a sudden now it's like there's like 4 or 5, first level spells coming in, and it's like, how many spells does a cleric get? And we haven't had any rest to be able to bring back spells yet.
Yeah, in some
I'm not
respects,
complaining that I'm getting healing.
in some respect, we definitely got to be on the honor system with that stuff, but I do encourage players to be as meticulous and organized with tracking their player abilities as possible, because there's only so much I can track. I mean, I've taken the party treasury out of your hands, for goodness sake. I mean, at the least, track your spell usage and your character abilities, please and thank you.
Well, that's why I set up the boxes. It's like I have a box for how many hit points I could heal, and I keep that, meticulously tracked. Okay, so all my lay of hands are gone. All my, healing hand is gone. This is all gone. This is all gone. And I'm like, where are these people coming up with all this? And I even see James, who's like, hey, we have to ration off. When am I going to use this surge? It's like, do I want to use it this combat, or do I wait and see if I need it for a more pressing combat? Or if the next combat is not that bad, it's like, why didn't I use it before?
That's absolutely a sign that James is improving in his understanding of 5e, which is a good thing, but is also a bad thing from the GM perspective, because I had become accustomed to him burning his action surge in the first combat of the day. So that way, knowing that there were more combats coming up, he wouldn't always have access to those extra attacks, but he's become a lot more savvy with his expenditure of action surge.
Well, and
Yeah,
I noticed
the
some of us. I notice some of us have our tendencies. Like, my characters tend to strategize a little more. It's like, okay, I don't have to do damage every single round. And if I'm playing a character like a wizard or a cleric or something, I don't have to be right up in front of combat and damaging something every single round. I can move, I can, do some defense, I can do this or that, but I'm doing something. But some of our players have a tendency of, if I'm not doing damage every round, I'm not helping combat.
Yeah.
See, and playing the class that I'm playing an artificer, a battlesmith, I'm dancing in between that. I'm better than the half casters with my casting, and I'm lesser than a full caster, but I'm better at combat than any of the casters, and I can stand and hold my own on the front line, but I'm not going to be dealing a lot of damage. But I'm also not a tank, and I'm not a shield either. So I can bounce back and forth between that role of backpacking those in front of me, and I can also do a little damage and step up and take out that extra opponent that showed up late.
Yeah, it seems like you've found one of the character options that is kind of a multi-class within a single class.
Yeah, I've been really interested in this character in this class since 3.5, I think it came out in Eberron, and it's really been interesting and added a new aspect to the fantasy genre, and it's something I hadn't thought of in a long time. It almost added the steampunk feel to it.
Yeah, which I dig heavily for sure. Enemir has heavy steampunk aspects depending on which era you happen to be in. And I think with that we have successfully accomplished a second 18-minute tangent within the same RPU OOC tonight. So, to get us back on track here, after meeting Dag, and that was all kind of intentional, I wanted to get your guys' perspectives on new characters, how to introduce new characters, yada yada, character. Up the stairs here to the cathedral, we found what I started taking to referring as giant crabs, or infernal crabs. You can see here they're labeled as just giant crabs, but they did have a bit of an infernal look about them. They had some spines that were emitting this kind of brimstone sulfuric gas, and we can see here that they have all been defeated, as well as the barbed devil up here. He proved to be a bit of a tougher opponent, as he had ranged attacks, and he just kept throwing those and then retreating further back and back into this area until he had nowhere else to go.
And that's where I was talking about with the strategy of you don't have to do damage every round to be effective, which is why I ran and gave chase to this thing, and everybody else was giving chase to this thing, but still presenting as a target for it. And I was pretty lucky that none of those spines got through, but they kept on hitting the shield and this and that. And so, but you can do a lot even if you don't throw a point of damage out.
Yeah, I think my barbed devil threw 6 hurl flames and attempted to summon another barbed devil, and was unsuccessful on every single attempt. The giant infernal crabs were not very successful, but one of them, of course, did roll a natural 20 against Celestial, so it found the little pinch between your armor there, and it was able to get a little sting on your love handles.
But even then, it did like what, 4-5 points of damage
with a crit. With a crit, yeah. It definitely was not the most painful attack, but it was still kind of one of those, like, really? I just got hit by this giant crab. And scooting ahead here into the cathedral itself, we can see 2 sets of spiral staircases leading up to a level that, of yet, is unexplored. And right here is the combat that ended off this Tuesday session. I'm going to try to prevent scrolling too far left because I don't want you all to see what's on the other side of that curtain there. GM privilege only. Here we have the pirate slave characters that Don was referring to, and they were using bandit captain stats. So I think these guys are like CR3. I think the spine devil is also a CR3. So that's just kind of indicative of how powerful these packs can be when a devil has its hold over your soul and has that contract. But the state of Elturel and the fact that these pirates...
We lost you.
Where'd you lose me?
You just finished saying about how the devil has the control over the soul, and then you went and you were going into that other thought, and that's when we lost you.
Basically the state of these bandit captains, their mental state was shattered.
And we still don't have sound from you.
Once Elturel was drawn into the Nine Hells, these bandit captains, these pirates, they basically lost all of their mental acuity. So they were completely deranged when your characters encountered them. And we can see here another successful resolution to a combat, which is, of course, what we always want to see. But Don here, definitely not rocking as many hit points as he would like.
I think I have like between 10 and 14 hit points left. And that's even after all the heals that he has taken during that combat, which prompted that little that explanation of, where did some of these heal spells come from? Not that I'm complaining about being healed, but, if you know what our resources are, and you know that we are really down on resources, as a GM, you don't want the TPK, because, again, as Jason was saying before, if a game is no fun, nobody's coming back to it. And suffering some loss is good, but it's like, okay, now I just wiped out the entire party. What do we do now?
And every party's got their acceptable threshold of loss as well, and that's kind of the fine balance every GM has to walk in finding out what his or her party is going to prefer.
Well, you have to have that sense of danger, and when that combat started, I'm like, are we going to start calling Don's character Mike because he's getting dropped? And we have to have a way to get past it, but the sense of danger has to be there. Like when our resources run out, we won't have the ability to pick him back up. So we have resources to pick him up now, but when they're gone, we won't be able to pick him back up, or ourselves or each other. So this is giving us that sense of danger now. And the continuation, we're going to have to find some place to rest the characters, to reset spells, to do all this. And it's going to have to be somewhere in here. Otherwise, it's just going to get harder and harder and harder, and you won't be able to pull that sled anymore.
Well, and if you look at it, and I've played as long as you have. I played since the Red Box Edition when it first came out, way back in the early 70s, late 70s, early 80s and such. And one of the important things that I've seen in all these modules is the fact that they throw combat after combat after combat after combat. That's the entire, if you walk through a dungeon, every single room has either a combat or a trap, something to reduce your resources. When Dan creates an adventure, when Dan creates Enemir, when we're traveling or if we're in the middle of something, we may face 2, maybe 3 combats per game day, versus in a module where it's like 2 to 3 combats every game hour. And that's where the whole, can we take another rest? Can we get our resources back? No. Okay, the next combat depletes even more resources. Can we do that? No, you just rested about 15 minutes ago. It's like, well, wait a minute. We've had 3 combats in 15 minutes. Look at football players. Look how tired they get after playing, and they take breaks in between, almost each play, and they trade out players so that they don't get too winded or too damaged and things like that. But if you look at our game, it's like for us, each combat takes maybe about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours to do, but the characters have only been fighting for 2 minutes,
if even that. And that's, of course, the difference between overland travel and dungeon travel. With Enemir, we tend to spend a lot more time overland, whereas in these modules, it seems like the overlands are kind of the interim scenes between your dungeons.
And the thing is also though with a lot of these modules is that the overlands don't have, so it's like, look, we're going to spend 5 game days traveling. It's like, great, we've had 5 days of long rest, but we didn't lose any resources, we didn't lose any hit points, we didn't lose anything. And it's like, now I'm going to hit you with 12 combats in a row. It's like, well, wait a minute, we don't have any resources to face 12 combats.
See, that could go the other way too. You can have situations set up and your players can just skate right through it and hardly even notice the encounter because it was so easy, and you have to make sure that you keep up even with clever players. The things you didn't think of. It's like this encounter, it's like I'm looking back at it and it's like there's so many things I shoulda, coulda, woulda done. I should have looked up in the stairs, make sure nobody's hiding in the stairway to come out and stab me in the back. But that's the luxury we have of looking at a map. We don't have the real world to look into where it takes me less than half a second to look up with my eyes in real life, as opposed to mentioning to the DM, hey, look, I want to look up into the stairwell. Okay, roll the dice. Do I see anything? All right, no, you don't. Yeah. Okay, now I'm thinking as a player, does that mean I didn't see anything or I didn't see anything?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And just on a difficulty level, I tend to...
You cut out again. I see your lips smoothing. Nothing's coming out.
I don't know how much longer I don't know if I need to get a new keyboard or a new headset or what the deal is. This is the first time this has ever happened. I was just going into difficulty that, for me as a GM, the way I kind of see it is our level of difficulty should more or less equate to our overall years of experience. And for the most part, most of us have been playing for decades. So even though I think universally among the rest of the players it was the most reviled campaign I've ever done, I speak of course of Agent Orange, for me it was one of my most favorite campaigns because I got to see your characters in the most extreme difficult circumstances. This is a zombie apocalypse set during early 1970s Carlsbad, Artesia, Roswell, New Mexico. Jason, you know the area very well. And our characters have crap for resources. We're using the alternity rules system, which is basically you get hit once or twice and your character is done. And we played an entire 4 to 5 year zombie apocalypse in this region of the world using one of the most hardcore gaming systems I've ever played. And to tie that back to the point you were making, Jason, about how if it's not fun, then people aren't going to come back, that's exactly the experience that Agent Orange quickly became. I mean, I was running it on an annual basis, I want to say 6 to 10 games, because I figured that's about all that the group could handle. Any more than that, it's just too much horror, too much gore, too much negativity, and we need to get back to some heroism, some Star Wars, something else. But by the time the 3rd year rolled around for Agent Orange, I could just, even though we're playing virtually, I could hear the groans from everybody's apartments and homes across the city. Just, oh god, we have to do this again. And it very quickly got to
you cut out again. So this is why I'm talking on here. But from our point of view, from my point of view specifically, it was one of those. It was a grind game of let's collect resources. Oh wait, there's no resources here. Where are we going to go to get more resources? And all it became was a resource grind. Yes, we had some story in there and such, but the main gist of the story was, hey, we need to get these resources, and we're facing a enemy that one bite would kill you. So one bad die roll would kill you.
I'll contest that with there was no story because you as the players were not invested into the scene. I feel Agent Orange gave us the greatest platform and open board to create our own stories with, but because there wasn't a lot of interest in it to begin with, that's what it became, was just a game of resource allocation. And okay, we know we're going to have to fight zombies later on, so we're going to need weapons, and we're going to need bullets, and we know we're going to need to survive, so we're going to need food, we're going to need water, and that's all it became.
See, and for me, because I didn't play those, I would go back and read the logs on the website, and I saw the story. And of course, because of the geographical location I live in,
Right.
The story actually had a lot more oomph to me, because I'm looking at these sites daily. You know, I've been to almost all of these sites, and I'm thinking, all right, if I was playing, what would I do? Here's where I came. Here's where I would come in, and I actually had started to design a backstory and some other things to fit in there, and I just never did get a chance to jump in the game due to real world commitments.
Yeah, just remember, I did have a character that was intended for you to jump into. Did you ever jump into the campaign? The character of Lance, who was basically the survivalist who had years of supplies in his home.
Yeah, I was working on something of one of the missile silos, living in one of the missile silos.
Yep. And there definitely was a lot of story to Agent Orange. I just feel that the story of Agent Orange, it could have been a lot more had the players been more invested in the scene and in the characters, but it definitely became more of a mechanical grind type of experience, especially as the seasons grew on and on. It just became, all right, well, where's the end game here?
Well, that brings us back to where, we're looking at the module. We know the module's gonna have a spot somewhere for you to refuel, so to speak. But when you're playing a game like that, it's real easy to fall as a player and a GM, because if you, barring completely railroading your characters to steer in a certain way, you can't make them play in a certain way. And when the things that become important in the game mechanically become something important with the story, story tends to take a back seat because mechanics take over.
It's like watching your fuel gauge on your car while you're driving down the highway and going, I'll make it to the next rest area, and then realizing that you just ran out of gas halfway between the first rest area and the second rest area.
Yeah, and I was a huge fan of all the characters that were created through Agent Orange, but I think I was more a fan of the potential of what they could be than what we actually saw. That first season that we played of Agent Orange, I'd say that was flawless. Everybody was fully into that, but I think once we got to the end of that first season and we saw how many characters got killed off and just how bloody it was going to be, I think people were a lot more apprehensive coming into the second season of it.
Well, I also based my character off of, my real life quotes uncle.
Right.
He wasn't really our uncle, but he was so close to our family that he was our uncle, and he was a cop, and I dedicated the character to him, who passed away a while ago. So I just wanted to give a little tribute to him. And he was a police officer, and the police officer's skills came in handy for working with this type. But that's what invested me in the first one is, I was doing justice to him and the way he was.
Yeah. And to touch on Jason's point of you can't make characters play the way that you see them, I think that's where the second season of Agent Orange started to deteriorate. Is Justin, for whatever reason, he decided to go with my character is losing his mind angle. And while that is a perfectly justifiable angle to play, I've seen it in Walking Dead happen enough times where, yes, the characters lose themselves, but part of the beauty of the show is that a lot of them also find themselves too. And I wanted to see that happen, and I was encouraging the other players out of game, hey, try this idea, because he was kind of in a state of mind in character where he thought nothing was real, and he was in hell, and he was already dead, and none of this stuff mattered anymore. So it made it very hard for his character to have any motivation. And the fact that I'm encouraging everybody out of game, like, try to bring his character back. This would be a great story element if we can draw this character back from the brink of insanity. And it just never seemed to happen, is definitely where the story started to take a turn in a different theme.
Well, the other thing too, though, is that when you're dealing with that, you're also dealing with a player who's, again, we're all people. We don't know each other's motivations and such. So none of us really knew if Jason was going to be, or Justin was going to be one of those people that's going to be like, okay, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to yes and improv. Or if he's going to stick to his guns and say, no, I'm going to descend into complete self-destructive madness no matter what anybody does. And it leaves us feeling frustrated because we didn't realize if there was a way to bring it back.
Yeah, and we tried it from many different aspects, too. I mean, I had Mark's character literally go insane and try to kill Justin's character just to instill in Justin a sense of fear, or his character a sense of fear, so that the trigger would occur that if I'm feeling this fear, then there's got to be something real about this. At the very least, this is real and is really happening. And then we tried the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where characters like your police officer and John Murtaugh's character, they were trying to approach him from a more understanding and heartfelt perspective, trying to draw him back with love and understanding, and just nothing was landing.
When it comes to the mindset of the character, a character in a pretty well-known story of The Stand, Trash Can Man comes to mind, who, as a insane character, was still very capable and kept going and was able to do things. Yeah, in the end he died and took a lot with him, but the way his character worked, I could almost see Justin trying to go in that direction.
My life for you.
But also, I mean, looking at that insanity direction, and ways that it could have gone, and this is a very recent example. I don't know if you guys ever watched the show, but it's absolutely brilliant. Have you watched Prodigal Son?
I have not.
Prodigal. Make sure you just watch a few episodes. But what it is that this guy is a serial killer, and he's in a mental institution right now. He was caught, and he's in a mental institution, and his son became a forensic analyst, more like a profiler, because he has that experience of having a dad that's a psychopath. So he brings that information to helping the police to solve crimes. But the dad is insane, but plays it well. And I mean, he's brilliant. It's a brilliant insanity. That's a way that you could play insane and make it work. You can see it on Hulu. It's on Fox. So Hulu would have it. And there's probably a couple other places that you can see it, but it's on Fox. Maybe even Fox's app might have it.
Gotcha. All right. I will definitely have to look into that. And I think because I'm having so many microphone cutout issues, I'm going to hold off on the Enemy or Historia segment until our next episode. We've at least managed to cover the Descent into Avernus recap up to the current stage.
And we covered almost 45 minutes of tangents. And
Yep. That's the best way to do it right there. You start off with one plan, and then you throw that thing in the garbage, and you talk about a whole bunch of other stuff instead. That's just the nature of this mode of TV.
Well, I've definitely enjoyed talking about all this stuff. I mean, it gives you, when you're playing, you kind of, especially as an older player, you think about things differently now than I did back in, I don't know, the 90s. I didn't think about it
Right.
the same way. So, talking about the game in this recap form brings us a little deeper into our thoughts as a player and as the character. So it's a good perspective on how we've progressed to where we are and how we've done it.
Yeah, we do get a lot of extra tidbits through this out of character mode of discussing the campaign than we do in the context of the game itself. I think largely due to the fact that there's just 3 of us here. Whereas while we're in game, there's the constant drive to push the story, and you've also got the other characters who, by rights, deserve their spot and their turns.
I also think that this is a great medium for us to be able to, have people, when our viewership goes up for the live version of this versus all the people that watch it when we're, not live.
Right.
But I'm hoping that this gives an incentive for them to watch us live, to be able to post questions, or, for us to ask questions of them, like, asking, what would you do in this kind of situation as a DM, or what would you do in this kind of situation as a player? And getting their feedback and being able to read it off the stream channel, the stream chat. I mean, this is just amazing at the ability for us to communicate, not only us telling them stuff, but for them to be able to tell us some stuff, or go onto our Roll20 Facebook page, our Roleplay Unlimited Facebook page, and post questions or post discussion topics that they'd like us to go over, so that even if we're not doing a Historia that week, or if we're, if it the game that didn't have a lot of discussable options, we can talk to people and say, hey, look, here's where we come from on that concern.
Yeah, and even to take it a step beyond that, some of the Q&As that I've asked of both of you throughout this out of character hour and a half here, the same would apply to any of our viewers. I mean, I imagine some of our viewers have played before, have GM'd before, or at the very least are interested in the field. And if you're not watching us live and able to respond to the stream chat here, and you happen to be on the Facebook page, then respond to the question there. Like, hey, as a DM, this is what I would do to introduce a new character, or this is how I feel about rules arbitration and how much time it should take, and the protocols that should go into it. Because overall, we're just trying to be part of the gaming community, and we would like to have more interactions with our fans. So, as Don said, if you are viewing here or viewing it later or on our Facebook page, throw out some interaction. We've got Don and James as our moderators on the Facebook page, and they are more than happy to communicate and discuss anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, and don't feel off about us, putting up like the restriction to ask a couple questions first, because we did have a couple of inappropriate people coming onto the site because they didn't understand what role-playing aspect we were dealing with, and so it was humorous for us, but we also want to make it family friendly for you guys to come on board and not to make anybody feel uncomfortable.
It's like oh, go ahead.
The definition of Dungeon Master really changes perspective on that.
It's like in The Big Bang Theory when Howard meets Bernadette and he asks her, do you like role-playing games? She says, like Dungeons and Dragons or in the bedroom? And he says, either. And she goes, no. It's like, yeah, there's definitely 2 understandings of role-playing. And I was very aware of that when I created the group, but we've been role-playing Unlimited for 10 years plus. I mean, we never really officially had a name before that, but this is the name we've had, and this is the name we're sticking with, so whatever.
Role-playing Unlimited. Are you a gamer?
But as you posted, we're trying to hit goals. We're trying to hit, a 35 goal for Twitch right now. And after we hit that goal, of course, we're going to set another higher goal and such. So please tell your friends, If you can't watch us live, watch the replays. If you want to ask us anything, we are very open. We're all very friendly people, and willing to answer anything or give advice. If you're stuck on something, I had a friend of mine ask me a question the other day. It's like, how do I move my characters along without railroading them? And the answer that I provided, which is find out what the character's backstory is, and then make that part of the backstory. Like, again, Justin, who creates these whole families, make it about a family member that's in another town. Now they have an incentive to go to that town, and they feel like it's their control versus you railroading them there.
Sometimes a little more carrot, a little less stick. Sometimes a little more stick and a little less carrot. It just whatever motivates your PCs.
Yes, indeed. And in addition to checking out our Twitch page and please giving us a follow, also check out our YouTube page. We've been
We lost you again, Dan.
Of course we did, and this is why we're about to close out right now. Can you hear me now?
You got out the words Twitch page.
Goodness gracious. All right. Well, in addition to checking out our Twitch page, please also check out our YouTube page. We've come a ways with some video editing and placing our game videos onto there with extra sound effects and just cool little features like that I think you'll all get a kick out of. So, to summarize, thank you, Don. Thank you, Jason, for being here tonight as co-hosts. It was a pleasure. Glad that we were able to get those recaps complete for our streaming audience who doesn't necessarily have the time to watch the 3.5-hour full production of the weekly game. And I will turn it over to you to say your farewells. I will turn it over to you to say your farewells before we head off.
Okay, once again, thank you guys very much for supporting us and for being a part of this. And I'm hoping that you guys have as much fun with this as we do presenting it. And again, your feedback and your interaction, your participation, always welcome.
First off, thanks guys for letting me jump in, throw in my own 2 cents worth on all of this. It's appreciated. And like everybody said, if there's any questions you have, anything you want to know, perspectives on or advice on how to run the games, how to get into the games, how to keep your characters interested, just ask anything you want. Anything role-playing related, we'd all be happy to answer.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, viewers, for joining us for another episode of Out of Character. Have a great night, all.